Today, we're diving into a massive political shakeup. The federal government is rolling out a staggering $81.8 billion over 5 years to bulk up Canada's military. And Power and Politics puts Defense Minister David McGuinty right in the hot seat. We're going to break down whether this is real action or political theater, why Canada suddenly wants to act like a sovereignty powerhouse, and who comes out looking stronger in this interview.
The federal government says this is a defense-focused budget, calling it a blueprint to defend our sovereignty. They've laid out a plan to boost defense spending by about $82 billion over 5 years, part of the government's push to move closer to NATO targets. That means spending 5% of Canada's GDP on defense by 2035, something Prime Minister Mark Carney committed to this summer.
This is the government flexing legacy branding. They're selling this as a turning point. But let's be honest, Canada has been behind NATO targets for 2 decades, and now they suddenly want applause for catching up? That's not strategy. That's political cleanup dressed as patriotism.
It marks a turning point for Canada, which has historically fallen behind its NATO allies.
A confident nation that protects its sovereignty at home and its interests abroad through strength, stability, and partnership with allies. We share our values. This is what we're doing, Mr. Speaker.
David McGuinty is the Minister of National Defense, and he joins me now. Minister, it's good to see you again. Thank you for being here today, sir.
Hi, David.
There's a lot of money in this budget for defense, about $82 billion over the 5 years. I mean, where does this bring the country on its path to get to that ultimate goal of now 5% of GDP for NATO?
Well, the first thing we did was decide that we were going to begin by beginning and achieve the 2% target. And we're doing it 5 years ahead of schedule. So by March 31st, we'll be at 2%. Of course, this lays track for further investments as years go on. And as you know, we are going to be reevaluating in 2029 and hopefully achieving. Our plan is to achieve the 5% target by 2035.
Anytime a minister uses words like hopefully, plan, or reevaluate, you already know the target is cloudy. And calling it joining the ranks of NATO partners is a convenient way of dodging how far behind Canada has been. It's not ambition, it's image management.
We're joining the ranks of all of our 31 NATO member country partners.
But what is your projection on where this gets the country right now? Like, I did some cocktail napkin math, so this is not official, but based on where you project the economy to be and what the spend is, it gets you to around 2.8%. Am I in the ballpark there?
You might be a little bit high, but you're in the ballpark. Slightly over 2, I think, is where we'll end up by the end of this process. But look, these are really necessary investments to make, David. I've had a chance to be touring around on 10 different military bases in the country. I've seen our operations overseas. We've got to bear down and look after the women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces, give them the equipment they need, the housing, the kit, the ammunition, the tools, childcare, health care. We owe it to the women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Okay, so it would only be a little bit over 2. Is that based on a NATO assessment of what you've announced, or is it just that some of the money that's there, even though it's for defense, it doesn't necessarily apply to the way NATO measures the spending?
Well, there's a differential between the PBO and NATO. We follow the NATO nomenclature measure, like all other NATO states do. So we're very much on target to hit the 2% based on NATO calculations and metrics, and we're going to be there.
Okay, but at the end of the 5 years in this budget, I mean, because the $82 billion is over 5 years. Like, I know you think you're going to hit the 2% by the end of fiscal or around there, but when you get to the end of what is in this budget horizon, what are we looking at? Is it 2.5, or is it just like 2.1, 2.2?
This is where the hypocrisy shows. They're announcing historic defense spending while admitting they haven't even chosen their submarine model. It's like bragging about buying a mansion, but you haven't picked the city, the builder, or the blueprint. It's spending for optics, not clarity.
Well, that obviously depends on the size of the economy.
Right.
And as we grow the economy and make these important, deep investments in making sure that we can really hyper-stimulate a sector like defense to create the jobs and the wealth and the investment that we intend to, and we're confident we can, I think this is going to have a bearing, of course, on those numbers. It's hard to predict.
Okay. What is not in these numbers, as big as they are, as I understand it, Minister, is money for the submarines. You're looking to buy 12 submarines at about $2 billion each. Yeah. When are we going to see the cash for that put into the fiscal framework here? Because that is a rather large expense.
Well, the first thing we need to do, David, is actually choose a submarine. Mm-hmm. And what we did do, of course, is set up a new agency, a professionalized agency that's going to help with the procurement for anything over $100 million. That's well underway. The CEO is taking, I think, his role in November 12th or thereabouts. So we're going to move forward. We've gone from 5 to 2 potential suppliers. We're going to now evaluate both of the bids, obviously reach out, galvanize as much as we can in terms of industrial benefits, the use of Canadian materials, input, long-term sustenance, maintenance of those submarines. All of this is in place. So we're not in a position yet to move on that front until we actually know what we're paying for submarines, over what time horizon, and how quickly we can take possession of them.
Okay, but we've had visits in the last couple of weeks from defense ministers from Germany and from Norway. The Prime Minister, and I believe you were also in South Korea. These are the two consortiums that are bidding on this. So if it's down to those final two, I know it's not done yet, but certainly within the 5 years of this budget, it will be. So when can we expect a decision on that? Are we looking at the first part of next year? Are we looking at later in 2026? What should we
It's difficult for me, David, to prejudge the outcome of an objective, transparent, arm's-length procurement process. But you can rest assured, and Canadians can as well, that we're going to try to get as many benefits as we possibly can out of this purchase. We need a good fleet of submarines, and that's exactly why we're beginning those negotiations. Okay,
but is it something that we expect in 2026, or would it be 2027, or could it be even later?
I'm going to wait and see what the agency does. We have a new CEO and a great team, so I'm confident they'll be moving on it very quickly.
Okay, they're going to look at buying equipment. The budget also talks about retiring equipment as a cost-saving measure. What are we talking about there? What are we looking at taking out of operation in terms of what the CAF is currently using now and won't use when these measures are put in place?
We'll be retiring a number of large pieces of infrastructure. For example, aircraft that we're no longer relying on, some helicopters. And I think also it has a bearing on the existing fleet of submarines.
Okay, because right now I think only one of them is operational, right? So why keep throwing good money after bad? Is that the idea? Just mothball them entirely?
That's the idea, that we have one that right now is in dry dock being repaired. We have one that's actually in full use. So it's a question now of, we'll take our lead from the Navy Admiral and the operational experts there, but that is exactly the idea. We're going to retire some of these fleets that just simply are costing us money as we prepare to take possession of better equipment for the women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces.
Okay, so as you look to buy equipment and kit out the CAF, you're also looking to drive economic growth through the defense industrial policy that is being developed, and have Canadian companies take advantage of this potential boom in defense spending. The Canadian Association of Defense and Security Industries, CADSI, which you know well, they said the budget provides the initial indicators for industry to position itself for new investments. But to raise capital, hire workers, or expand production lines, companies still need details of what the government will buy, how much, by when, and how it will preference Canadian suppliers. So if you want them to scale up to take advantage of this, they need a bit more information. When can they expect it?
They can expect it as soon as we've got it done. We're working very hard on the defense industrial strategy. We've consulted 17 allied countries. We've reached out and we've engaged over 1,000 companies and organizations who have traction in this area. I'm meeting with more capitalists, venture capitalists next week to get a better sense of the design of the features of this strategy. Obviously, we'll have a lot to say about the sovereign capabilities. Where do we need to invest? What kind of equipment? What are we really good at? Where's our comparative advantage? This has been in the works now for several months, and I really do appreciate CADSI's concern, and we will meet those questions when this overall initiative is announced.
Okay, but like, what kind of a horizon are we talking on here, Minister? The budget, it has a lot of big dollar amounts and commitments. Specifics are not in abundance, right? It is a commitment when it's ready, but if a business now wants to pivot away from its reliance on the United States to take advantage of this, it's going to need something a little bit more clear than when it's ready. So like, what are we talking about in terms of fiscal quarters or horizons here?
Look, we're getting there as quickly as we can. We want to make sure we don't rush this. We want to make sure we get it right. It's the first defense industrial strategy in Canadian history. So we're very concerned about making sure this is properly aligned between the public and the private sectors. We're looking at setting up a series of top secret classified lab settings so we can conduct research together, we can get the intellectual property, we can own it, we can participate in different ways. So we're getting to the end of this process, David. It's very encouraging.
Okay, you're scaling up these programs and trying to be more aggressive on the execution and delivery of procurement and just programs as a government writ large. And while you're doing that, you're cutting the size of the civil service by about 10% over the horizon of this cost reduction exercise. How do you do a better, more efficient job with 40,000 fewer people doing it?
Well, first of all, as an Ottawa area MP, David, you can imagine, I know how important our public servants are for all of the work that we do. And I've been here 21 years and I watched thousands of public servants in my own riding and beyond do incredibly important work and good work for Canadians. What we're doing now is re-examining the overall size of the public service. We've seen a 40% increase in the public service in the last 10 years. We think we can do a little bit about that in terms of reducing some of the numbers. But obviously, look, we're going to be looking at attrition. We're going to be looking at the proper approach to packages for folks so they can make a smooth transition. We'll be looking at consulting firms, consultants and their roles in the system. We'll be looking at government travel. We're really making the decision here, David, to move money, frankly, from one bucket, the operational bucket, to another, which is the investment bucket. So we can, again, make these important investments right into Canadian society. But
scaling up the ambition while scaling down the machinery of government, that can potentially work across purposes.
Look, there's a lot of options here for us to go forward. There are some phenomenal folks. They will continue to be phenomenal. We will maintain the kind of base that we need to get this work done. Obviously, the Prime Minister has also made it clear that AI will play a role in our government going forward. We owe it to provide a nimble and efficient government to Canadians. And that's what we're working towards.
That's the bailout line. When the plan has gaps, politicians pivot to AI will handle it. It's a modern version of magic thinking. You cannot slash your workforce and expect AI to deliver procurement, oversight, logistics, and top-secret coordination. It's bureaucratic fantasy disguised as efficiency.
Just one last question, Minister. It's another one of these reorganizational moves, like we saw when the Coast Guard moved from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans into the Department of National Defence. Transport Canada's aerial surveillance that we've seen in the Arctic is being moved into the Department of National Defence. Does that mean they're going to now become part of the Air Force? I mean, how will that work? And a service that's been cut back, will that now be built out as part of the Arctic sovereignty agenda?
Well, listen, the Canadian Coast Guard is going to continue with its important responsibilities in search and rescue and monitoring, in conservation work. We're going to be amending some legislation to give it some ability to help us with intelligence collection and security roles. Not that much is changing except on that front, David. I don't think we're talking about making the Canadian Coast Guards, fully armed up. We're not vessels. Right. We're talking about using our Canadian Coast Guards to be able to connect to our overall system of tracking what's going on in our country, what's going on continentally, what's going on in the Arctic. Very important going forward. So I think stay tuned. You're going to see more details about how this is being implemented.
So the Transport Canada aerial surveillance, just for clarity, like I understand what you're saying about the Coast Guard, but the Transport Canada issue, will those be military planes now? Or is it just going to, how will they be part of the Canadian Air Force?
Well, that's Transport Canada will continue doing what I understand what Transport Canada is doing. So we'll see how this all comes together. We just took our folks, 6,000 strong from the Canadian Coast Guard, and brought them into the defence family. So obviously we're looking to make sure that things are streamlined and we get the most coherent approach to security, intelligence, conservation, search and rescue and beyond. And that's exactly what we're working on.
Okay. Minister of National Defence David McGuinty, we appreciate the time. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, David.
This interview exposes a government trying to present a historic defense transformation while still figuring out the basics, timelines, procurement, and accountability. If you like breakdowns that cut through the political fluff and call out the contradictions directly, make sure to subscribe, because we're just getting started.